Welcome back to Hopeful Horizon, where we bring you stories that uplift, inspire, and remind us of the strength of the human spirit. Today's story takes us to a military cemetery, where a father's quiet grief for his fallen son is interrupted by a shocking act of disrespect. But this isn't just a story of pain. It's one of resilience, unity, and the power of a father's love to heal and inspire a community. As David Wilson stands to honor his son's legacy, he's forced to confront prejudice head-on in a way that will move and change everyone who witnesses it. So join us as we explore a journey of courage, compassion, and the strength to rise above hate. If stories of unexpected heroes, unforgettable moments, and powerful life lessons resonate with you, let us know in the comments. Be sure to subscribe and hit the bell to stay connected with Hopeful Horizon, and let us know where you're tuning in from. We're grateful to have you with us for another inspiring story. David Wilson took a deep breath, his hand gripping the small polished box, holding his son's service medals. Dressed in Marcus's favorite suit, a charcoal gray tailored to perfection, David felt a mixture of pride and grief as he walked through the hallowed grounds of the military cemetery. Rows upon rows of white headstones stretched before him, a quiet testament to the lives of countless men and women who had given everything. Today, he was here to honor his son, Marcus Wilson, a young man who had embodied courage, kindness, and a fierce loyalty to his country and his comrades. David moved slowly, his gaze steady as he approached Marcus's grave. Each step felt weighted, and he sensed eyes on him from some of the people gathered for the service. He noticed a small group standing off to the side, whispering amongst themselves. One of the women, a thin, pale figure with sharp features and an air of entitlement, looked at him with a hint of disdain. David felt the judgmental glances like a cold wind, but he ignored them, focused only on his son's memory. The woman, Susan, leaned toward a man next to her, muttering something under her breath. David caught only a few words. "Not a real hero," she'd said, voice dripping with a disdain that clashed sharply with the reverence of the moment. David closed his eyes briefly, steadying himself. He was here for Marcus, to remember the young man who had filled his life with pride and purpose. The whispers and glances were nothing compared to the honor of standing here for his son. As he approached Marcus's grave, memories flooded his mind. Marcus had been just 22 when he'd enlisted, driven by a passion to serve and protect. David had been proud, of course, but he'd also been fearful, knowing the risks, understanding the harsh realities of military life better than most. He himself had served for years and bore the scars, both seen and unseen, of combat. Yet Marcus had been unwavering, a natural leader who had quickly earned the respect and loyalty of his unit. They had loved him like a brother, and today some of them were here, dressed in their crisp uniforms, standing tall to honor their fallen friend. The chaplain began the service with a solemn prayer, his voice carrying over the silent crowd. David's gaze remained fixed on Marcus's grave marker, engraved with his son's name, rank, and the emblem of the U.S. Army. David's chest tightened as the chaplain spoke of sacrifice, bravery, and the strength it took to serve. A single tear escaped, slipping down David's cheek as he bowed his head, feeling the deep ache of loss. Marcus had been more than just a soldier. He had been David's only child, his joy, his pride. As the service continued, David felt the presence of his son's spirit, the echo of his laughter, his warmth, his tenacity. But the sense of peace was shattered when he heard the woman's voice again, louder this time. "I just don't see why people are making such a fuss over him," Susan said, her voice cutting through the reverent silence. "There are real heroes buried here, men who fought for this country their whole lives." A murmur of discomfort rippled through the crowd, but David forced himself to remain calm. He clenched his jaw, breathing deeply. He could feel the tension building, his body responding to the blatant disrespect. Marcus had fought for this country. He had given everything. The words stung, but David was determined to keep his composure. He had come here to honor his son, and he would not allow anyone to ruin that. The chaplain continued speaking, and David focused on his words, letting them soothe him. He noticed some of the soldiers from Marcus's unit glancing in his direction, their expressions a mixture of anger and empathy. They knew who Marcus was, what he had stood for, and so did David. As the service neared its end, Susan's whispers turned to louder, more insistent remarks. She stood a few feet away, her posture rigid, arms crossed over her chest. Her face held a sneer as she looked at Marcus's grave, and David felt the heat of her gaze burning into his back. "It's just that some people don't deserve this kind of respect," she said to those around her, her tone dripping with scorn. "Everyone wants to be a hero these days, but real heroes have done a lot more than, well, whatever he did." David's heart pounded as he tried to block her out, but the weight of her words pressed down on him. He could see the discomfort on the faces of those nearby, the silent exchange of glances as people turned away, unsure how to respond. Yet no one intervened, perhaps too shocked or too polite to confront her outright. The remarks hit David harder than he cared to admit. He was a veteran himself, a man who had faced adversity on and off the battlefield, but nothing had prepared him for this, a public insult to his son's memory on the very day they had come together to honor him. He clenched his fists, feeling the roughness of his son's metals pressed into his palm, but he forced himself to breathe, to focus on the memories of Marcus, on the pride he felt for his son. "Did he even do anything in combat?" Susan's voice cut through again, louder and more disdainful. "Or was he one of those support roles they send in to look good for the cameras?" David's hands trembled as he struggled to contain his anger. He wanted to turn, to tell her exactly who Marcus had been, the lives he had saved, the sacrifices he had made. But he reminded himself that today was not about Susan. It was about Marcus. It was about honoring his son's memory, about finding peace in the midst of loss. Still, the silence of the crowd stung almost as much as her words. No one spoke up. No one defended Marcus. And David felt a loneliness he hadn't known since the day he'd received the call about his son's death. David's composure finally cracked when Susan's insults grew even more cutting. She had taken a step closer, her face twisted with contempt as she directed her words at him. "It's pathetic, really," she sneered. "Some people just want to make martyrs out of nothing." David turned, his face a mask of restrained fury. He looked directly into her eyes, his voice low but steady. "Show some respect. We're here to honor all fallen soldiers. Every single one of them deserves that respect, regardless of your opinions." Susan scoffed, crossing her arms defiantly. "Oh, I have every right to my opinion. Just because you're grieving doesn't mean I have to play along with this charade." Her words struck David like a slap. For a moment, he felt lost, unsure of what to say or do. He looked around, seeing the silent support of the crowd, the empathy in the eyes of Marcus's friends, his fellow soldiers. And in that moment, he realized that this was bigger than just Marcus. This was about honoring the service and sacrifice of every soldier, every person who had given their life for something greater than themselves. David straightened, his voice strong and unwavering, as he addressed not just Susan, but the entire gathering. "My son, Marcus, believed in this country. He believed in unity, in the strength we find in each other. He fought not because he had to, but because he wanted to protect the people he loved." As he spoke, a hush fell over the crowd. People leaned forward, captivated by the passion in his voice, the raw emotion in his words. David continued, sharing stories of Marcus's bravery, his compassion, his dedication to his unit and his country. He painted a picture of his son as more than just a soldier. He was a hero, a son, a friend. Susan's face paled as David's words struck home, and the crowd's silent support became a powerful force, uniting them in shared respect and admiration. David's speech ended with a final, unwavering statement. "Today, we honor not just my son, but all the heroes who have made the ultimate sacrifice. Let's remember them with the respect they deserve." The crowd broke into applause, a powerful wave of support and solidarity. Susan, now visibly uncomfortable, looked away, her face flushed with embarrassment as the gravity of her actions settled in. David took a deep breath, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't felt since Marcus's passing. The service continued, but this time the air was filled with unity, respect, and a profound sense of gratitude for all those who had given everything. David felt his son's presence beside him, proud, as if saying, "Thank you, Dad." As David Wilson stands before the crowd, the air around him feels charged. His hand trembles slightly, but his voice, when he finally speaks, is strong and unwavering. Marcus was more than just my son, he begins, looking out at the sea of faces. He was a protector, a friend, a brother to his fellow soldiers. He didn't have to be a hero. He chose to be one every day, through every little act of kindness and courage. The crowd grows silent, hanging on his every word. He shares stories of Marcus's generosity and bravery, how he'd always volunteered for the riskiest missions, never for glory, but out of genuine care for others. David recalls a time when Marcus had stayed up all night, comforting a young soldier terrified by his first mission. He believed that the strength of a team depended on each person's courage and respect for one another, David says, his voice thick with emotion. Some people in the crowd wipe away tears, their faces softened by David's memories. Even the steely veterans standing at attention seem moved, nodding with respect. Susan, on the other hand, shifts uncomfortably. Her earlier disdain is fading, replaced by a sense of awkwardness under the intense, watchful eyes of the crowd. David glances at her but continues, drawing strength from the collective grief and respect around him. Marcus didn't care about who you were or where you came from. To him, everyone was worthy of respect. He'd have given his life for any one of his brothers or sisters in arms. He pauses, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. He believed in a country where we stand together, not divided. In that moment, David's voice, filled with love and grief, paints a vivid picture of Marcus, a son who had loved, served, and sacrificed. The crowd seems united, their collective loss blending into a shared reverence for the fallen soldier who gave so much of himself. Susan's expression shifts, and she finally looks down, feeling the weight of her own harsh words. David takes a breath and continues. My son's sacrifice wasn't just for me or for those he loved. It was for everyone standing here today. He locks eyes with the crowd, his gaze unwavering. It was for a country that has the power to be better, but that only happens if we choose to honor each other, truly honor each other. His words resonate deeply, their echoes lingering in the stillness. An older man steps forward, his voice choked as he shares a story of his own daughter, a young soldier who had died 2 years ago. One by one, others step forward to honor their loved ones, their voices weaving together tales of bravery, loss, and devotion. As the voices rise, Susan tries to leave, her face flushed and her movements hurried. Before she can slip away, an elderly woman standing beside her reaches out, stopping her in her tracks. You owe them an apology, the woman says, her voice firm but gentle. Today isn't about our opinions. It's about respect. Susan stares at her, visibly shaken. She glances around at the crowd, feeling the weight of their disapproval. Humbled, she stands still, unable to leave under the watchful eyes of those around her. David's heart swells as he listens to others speak. He realizes that this moment of unity is precisely what his son would have wanted, a gathering where people come together, not just to mourn, but to bridge their differences. The gathering becomes more than a memorial. It becomes a testament to the shared humanity of everyone present. Days after the memorial service, David receives a message from a friend. Your speech is everywhere, David. People are talking about it. Puzzled, David clicks the link and finds a video recording of his tribute to Marcus circulating online. It's been viewed thousands of times, with comments pouring in from people all over the country. Veterans, military families, and strangers alike share their stories, expressing gratitude for David's heartfelt words. Messages of unity and respect flood the comments, transforming his tribute into a nationwide call for understanding and compassion. The video captures the moment when David addressed Susan, and the tension is palpable even on screen. Many viewers express anger at her disrespect, while others echo David's message of forgiveness. This is the kind of reminder we need, one commenter writes. Thank you, Mr. Wilson, for showing us what real unity looks like. Meanwhile, Susan's name trends for all the wrong reasons. Known as the disrespectful woman from the viral video, she faces a wave of backlash. Strangers criticize her for her words, and some even reach out to offer words of forgiveness, encouraging her to reflect on her actions. The public reaction forces Susan to confront her behavior, and she finally reaches out to David with a heartfelt apology. In a private message, she expresses remorse, acknowledging her ignorance and asking for a chance to make things right. David, a man who's endured more hardship than most, accepts her apology with grace. "We all make mistakes," he replies, "but maybe you could spend some time with a veteran support group. It might give you some insight into what these men and women go through." Inspired by the overwhelming support and the impact of his words, David decides to create a foundation in Marcus's memory. He names it the Marcus Wilson Initiative for Unity, a program dedicated to promoting diversity, respect, and understanding for all those who serve. The foundation hosts events, provides scholarships to young soldiers from underprivileged backgrounds, and sponsors programs that foster unity and empathy among people from all walks of life. Through his foundation, David channels his grief into a powerful movement, carrying forward Marcus's legacy of kindness and courage. His tribute to his son becomes a lasting symbol of unity, a call to honor every soldier's sacrifice, and a reminder that true respect for each other can heal even the deepest wounds. As he reflects on the journey, David feels a profound peace. In his heart, he knows that Marcus's spirit lives on, not just in his memory, but in the unity and compassion he's inspired across the country. A year has passed since that unforgettable day at the cemetery. David Wilson stands once again at his son's grave, the wind carrying the faint scent of pine and freshly turned earth. The morning sun casts a soft golden light across the military headstones, each one marking the sacrifice of a life devoted to service. This time, David isn't alone. A small crowd has gathered, a mix of veterans, families, friends, and strangers, people who have been touched by the Marcus Wilson Initiative for Unity. News outlets and social media continue to carry stories of lives impacted by the foundation, and David's message of unity has spread across the country, even reaching overseas. The initiative has organized events, scholarship funds, and workshops, all dedicated to honoring service members of every background. Veterans who had once struggled with isolation now find solace and purpose within the community fostered by the foundation. Families, regardless of race or class, come together to share memories and stories, forming bonds in the name of those they've loved and lost. David looks around at the faces before him, noting how the initiative has touched so many lives. There are children of fallen soldiers, clutching tiny flags in their hands, elderly veterans leaning on canes but standing tall and proud, and even a few young men and women in uniform, their expressions respectful as they gather to honor Marcus and countless others. Standing among them, with her gaze fixed on Marcus's headstone, is Susan. She's made good on her promise, attending support group sessions, volunteering for the initiative, and working quietly to make amends. Today, she stands alongside David, her expression somber, yet peaceful. She's become one of the initiative's most dedicated volunteers, helping families with grief counseling and organizing events to bring communities together. As the memorial service begins, David steps forward, his voice strong, as he leads a tribute in Marcus's memory. "Today, we stand united to honor not only my son, but every man and woman who has given their life in service," he says, looking out at the crowd. "We may come from different backgrounds, but our grief, our pride, and our gratitude are the same, and in that, we find strength." The crowd listens in silence, each person finding their own piece of healing in his words. David shares new stories of Marcus, moments of kindness he hadn't spoken of before, pieces of his son's life that had always made him proud, but which he now understands were meant to be shared with others. He talks about Marcus's dream of a world where people respected one another, where unity and understanding were possible even in the face of prejudice and division. When he finishes, the crowd stands in quiet reflection, each person moved by the father's tribute. They begin to lay flowers at Marcus's grave, one by one, honoring the young man they never knew, but whose legacy has become a guiding light. In the end, David is the last to place a single white rose on Marcus's grave. He looks down, the weight of loss softened by the pride and peace that fill his heart. As he stands there, a young soldier approaches him, a man David recognizes from one of the Foundation's scholarship programs. The young man, barely in his 20s, is dressed in his crisp, new military uniform, his gaze filled with respect and gratitude. "Mr. Wilson," he says, his voice steady, I wouldn't be here without the Marcus Wilson Initiative. Your son's story gave me strength. I just wanted to say thank you." David smiles, his heart swelling with both sorrow and pride. He clasps the young man's shoulder. "Marcus would have been proud of you," he says. "Carry his legacy forward. Honor each other, always." As the crowd slowly disperses, David stands alone for a moment longer. The sky above is a brilliant blue, and he feels a quiet sense of closure, knowing he's done all he can to honor his son's memory. In his heart, he feels Marcus's presence, no longer just as his son, but as a symbol of something far greater, a call to unity, to respect, and to compassion. With a final, quiet goodbye, David turns and walks away from the grave, knowing that Marcus's spirit will continue to live on in every life he's touched. And as he leaves, he's filled with hope, knowing that the message he once delivered in sorrow now lives on in the hearts of countless others, guiding them toward a brighter, kinder future. Thank you for being with us on this heartfelt journey of love, loss, and healing. David's story reminds us that even in moments of deep pain, unity and compassion can triumph over division and hate. It's a powerful reminder that honoring each other's sacrifices brings us together, no matter who we are or where we come from. If you found strength and inspiration in this story, please share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss another uplifting story from Hopeful Horizon. We'll be back with more tales that challenge, inspire, and leave a lasting impression. Thank you for being part of our community. Until next time, stay hopeful, stay united, and always stand up for what's right.